Hello and welcome to Maddie Sorts It Out. In this video we'll be talking about how I did in comparison to my budget for the first week of July. It was a week in which I went to Bristol. I go to Bristol once a month to see my mother and other family members there, and it was one of those trips this month. I'll talk about things, but I'll probably pop some photos in as well while I'm talking so you can have a look at what I'm looking at. The budget was from July the 1st to the 7th. It's the first budget where I switched my budget to a calendar month basis. The first thing I want to talk about is that I realised sometime during the week that I hadn't taken all the expenses out of the budget for the last week in April, because initially when I started my annual budget, I started it on the 25th of April. But I wanted to switch to a calendar year basis, and the plan was to take all the expenses out for April. I took all the monthly expenses out for April, but I didn't take some of the annual expenses out, such as for gifts. There were some gifts in there, in fact quite a large gift in there. And what was the other thing there was? A trip to Bristol. There was a trip to Bristol during that week. So I have now taken them out of the budget. So you'll see that my annual expenses are different to last time I talked about them. They're less, even though I've had another trip to Bristol and had more gifts. What I've spent over the year from the 1st of May onwards is less now because I've taken out those expenses. I hope that's clear. We'll just go through it. So what did I spend on the week from the 1st of July to the 7th of July? Before we start, just a reminder that I had decided last week that I would include every expense in my reviews, whereas initially I was only including those expenses where I felt I could do something to reduce the expenditure. It just began to feel that I was talking about figures that had no actual relation to what was in my bank account and to how I was going to manage to get through the year. So I decided against that, and now I'm going to talk about real figures. Real money coming in, real money going out. So for the week from the 1st of July to the 7th of July, I had income of £1,329.49. £1.52 of that was bank interest on a small account that I had forgotten to add into my income last time. So that's not income just for the week. That's income, I think, since March. But nevertheless, I decided to bring that in, so it's in there now. And I spent £806.99, which sounds like a lot, but my rent is the biggest spending. That was £695. And I went to Bristol, and my travel to Bristol, I spent £48.36. £21.05 of that was on food, and £27.31 of that was on petrol. I did the thing that I always do before I go to Bristol. I went the night before to fill up my car. That cost me £16.94, and that was my general petrol expenditure for the month, really. And then I drove down to Bristol and did what I did in Bristol. Saw my mum, spent some time with my niece, drove back. It was one of my short visits to Bristol. I literally just spent the night there. I got back, got to the nearest petrol station, filled up the car, £27.31. It's normally around £35. But I think the reason it's less this time is because on the way down, there was an awful lot of traffic, so much so that traffic came to a halt on about 5 or 6 occasions during my trip, and there were long bits of crawling along, and obviously you use less petrol when you're not going at 70. And when I came back, I decided to go the cross-country route, which is a shorter route, going up around the motorways up to Birmingham and then around Birmingham and then turning off. That is a longer route, but it's usually a quicker route because it's motorway. You're doing 70 all the time. You're not having to stop at junctions and do roundabouts and all that. But I decided I just had enough with motorways. It was such a long trip going down. I thought I didn't want to be on the motorway going up. So I went cross country. So I think because of that, because of the slower trip going down and the slower speed of the trip going back, I think that was why my petrol was down. It obviously took me a bit longer to get home than if I'd gone on the motorway, but it was so much nicer that I think I might actually go that route most times. There are services along the way, so if I need to stop, I can. So anyway, we'll go back to my spending. I had a 30p spend on incidentals, and that was because I went into Aldi to buy some groceries and I forgot to take a bag in with me. And normally I have a bag in my backpack, but I had just used it for something, so it was in the car with some things in it. Can't remember what I'd used it for, but it was something I didn't want to put groceries on top of. So I bought a carrier bag. So that's that 30p. I spent £14.65 on food. The weeks that include a trip to Bristol, I normally spend this on food because for 2 days of the week I'm not here. I'm in Bristol and I have got a different budget that I use for food. The week that I go to Bristol is always less expenditure on food. But I didn't do any big shops. I just did a few little shops. I also had enough in that I didn't need to do a big shop last week. Now, I'm more than happy to take photographs of the receipts and put them up for anybody that is keen to see what I spent my money on. And I shall go through the rest of my expenses. And I spent £11.74 on toiletries and cleaning supplies. And I bought a 7-litre storage box, which is, you may think that's not toiletries and that's not cleaning, but I want it so that I can soak my feet when I do my pedicure. It was £3 and it's just the right size for my feet, really. I thought that is kind of toiletries. I bought some more scrunchies for my hair, and I bought 2 bottles of hand wash, which were £1 each. They were 500ml each, which I thought was pretty good. Then I got some shower gel. I try and get ones that aren't tested on animals, and I found that's quite hard to get hold of at places, so B&M always seems to have some, so I got it from there. I got a little caddy, and I've got it to put food in my kitchen. Food isn't separated out in Leicestershire, but I find that I'm having to take a bin that's a quarter full out to the bin store because it's got food in it and it stinks. So I've decided to have this caddy and fill it with much smaller bags, and I do still have some from when I bought some before, and then I can take those bags out to the bin much more frequently and only empty the big bin when it's full, and it won't smell because it won't have anything in it to smell. So I bought that. That was £3, that caddy. You'll see on the receipt £1.49. That was on some dandelion and burdock, alcoholic, very slightly alcoholic dandelion and burdock, which I just treated myself with. But I put that in my food expenditure. So yeah, that's all my spending. So it means that for my month so far, for food, my budget's 108. I've spent £14.65 and I've got 93.35 remaining. With petrol, I started with £35. I spent £16.94 and I have £18.06 remaining. For my incidentals, £50. I spent 30p. I've got £49.70 remaining. Toiletries and cleaning, I started with £23, spent £11.74 and I've got £11.26 remaining. For my phone, my budget's £5. I've spent nothing yet. So adding all those figures to my annual budget, I haven't spent my budget yet for clothes, visits, travel or dental, or for my car, or for my miscellaneous expenses. My miscellaneous expenses, if you remember, include my house insurance, money I'm going to owe the Office of the Public Guardian for a power of attorney, and my Microsoft 365 basic subscription. I haven't paid out anything on all of those, so the budget's still there. For gifts, I had a budget of £730 and I've spent £57.91, leaving £672.09. My Bristol budget of £720, I've spent £119.59, and I've got £600.41 remaining. And the reason I'm doing that annually rather than monthly is for things like this month, where I'm going to end up going twice in a month. I normally would have gone around the last week of the previous month. That was my normal routine for going, but because it was so hot, I delayed it a week. I just didn't want to travel in that heat. But that does mean that my next visit is probably going to be in July. It may be at the beginning of August, I'm not sure, but I think it probably will be in July. And therefore I need some flexibility. I can't do a monthly budget when it may work out like that. For my housing costs, which are my rent, my council tax, my electric and water and broadband, I had a budget of £10,968, and I've spent £2,521.62 so far, and I still have remaining in my budget £8,446.38. And my monthly budget, because I work on a month and then I move on, my monthly budget for the year is £2,652, and I have spent £359.93, which means I have remaining £2,292.07. I think I've done quite well with my monthly budget. I'm quite pleased with myself. I didn't actually think I could do that. Now my income this year, my income this month is less than normal. And that's because I had to pay a plumber because the water heater in my family home that I rent out was leaking. I don't know why it was leaking. I haven't been sent a copy of the invoice by the property management company. I normally am. And once I've seen that, I hopefully will see a reason why it was leaking. But that's reduced how much rent I get in this month. But I'm still okay, because my income so far from the 1st of May is £4,753.37, and I've spent £3,059.05. So I'm still doing quite well with that income. I've still got money aside that I can use for my travel in November to see my son, and for these other things when they crop up. Fingers crossed, if my income continues to come in okay. So I'm quite happy. I feel like I'm sticking to the budget. I'm doing really well. I'm quite happy that things are on track. Oh, and I've got down, the last thing I have on that page is donations of £35.59. I am not going to do any donations this week. I feel that there's still an awful lot of uncertainty in my budget. I don't want to be diving into savings, so I'm not going to make any donations this week. It doesn't feel sensible to make donations until I'm sure that it's not going to put me in a position of needing to dive into my savings. Okay, so that's it for this week. And there's only one more thing I want to talk about, really, and that is stamps. Because although I can't add this as income, I have received 8 first-class stamps from the post office. And the reason I've got these 8 first-class stamps from the post office is because I paid to have a letter signed for back in January. There's a form you can get from the post office, so I wrote making a claim saying that it was never signed for, which it wasn't. It was never signed for. it went, and I never heard anything back from it at all. I kept tracking it and they kept saying it was still at the post office. And I eventually heard from the people that they had received it. But the reason I wanted it signed for is because it was a letter of complaint and I wanted to know that it got there. So I've done this about 4 times now, because I think about 5 times I've sent letters that I've paid for the signed for service and they haven't been signed for when they've got to the other side. And you may think, what are all these letters about? But I'm a power of attorney for my mum, so I send letters on behalf of my mum. When you're working as a power of attorney for somebody else, you're unable to do things through the online way of doing it. For instance, I cannot do my mum's tax return online. I have to do it in paper. And I want to be sure it gets there, obviously, because I don't want to find myself fined because my mum's tax return hasn't got there, or find my mum fined. I don't know who'd be fined, probably me, because I'm listed as her agent for tax. I keep trying it because I think that would be the best way. If they get it and sign for it, and occasionally it is signed for, and you think, great, I know you've got it now. And I went to the post office to send something at one point, and I said, I'll send it signed for. I said, whether they'll sign for it or not is another thing. And he said, oh yes, they will, they have to. And I said, well, I've sent 3 from this post office. I'm still getting told that those letters are at the post office, even though it was weeks and weeks ago. And he said, no, that's not right. So I got my phone and the Royal Mail app and said to him, look. And he was like really shocked to see that there was 3 things that were still showing at that post office. He was like, oh, they must have got lost in the... And I said, no, I phoned up. They have definitely received those letters, because this was to the tax, I think. And I had to phone up in the end, but I wanted to make sure it had got there. And he was like, oh, no, they shouldn't do that. They shouldn't do that. He said, there is a form you can fill in and complain. I was like, thank you, give me the form. So now I know that whenever I send a letter signed for, I keep the receipts to one side. I put on what it was, what document it was for. And if they don't sign for it, which happens maybe 50% of the time, then I put in this form, I fill in this complaint form and send it off, and I get 8 £1 stamps. But it did take a long time. I sent that in February. It's July and I've just received it. At least I've got my stamps, and that has saved me some money. Okay. So thank you very much for watching my budget video. I hope it was all clear and understandable, and you can see where I'm going, and I'm getting there. And I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.